If you're not using toilet paper for your makeup routine, you're missing out. Welcome to episode 2 of Self-Care Sister Tips. After you apply your foundation, take 2 sheets of toilet paper and gently pat it into the skin. Do not rub it, just tap it gently into the skin. This is going to help you in 2 ways. It'll absorb excess oil, excess foundation. It's going to give you a more natural finish. So if you're a no makeup girl, you're going to love this. Then take a fluffy brush, dip it into your favorite setting powder, and lightly dab over the areas you want to mattify. Once you're done applying the rest of your makeup, repeat that step again. Yes, you can use blotting paper, but toilet paper is more absorbent. This will give you a flawless base, I promise. Self-Care Sister out. I told my best friend that her fiance was cheating on her and she did not believe me. Disclaimer, this is my story time. I walk into their bedroom and I see her fiance with my best friend's sister. What I actually saw was just him kissing her neck. But why is your fiance kissing your sister's neck? And as soon as they saw me, they freaked. They jumped up really quick. He ran out of the bedroom and then he just stared at me. Like he always does, just staring. I ran to my bestie and I told her everything. By the way, everyone at this point had had so many drinks. I was actually the only sober person at this party. What happened next was a nightmare. My bestie turns to me and tells me to leave the party. She told me that I was just jealous of her relationship, that I was projecting on her. She throws my purse at me and I leave. I cried so much, I was mortified. She was so desperate to make her relationship work. Okay, by the way, her sister actually lived with them at the time. This girl had no money and no job. My best friend supported her in every single way possible. Her and I obviously didn't speak after that until 6 months later. She calls me on the phone in tears. Then she tells me she finds out her sister is pregnant. Her fiance is leaving her for her sister, and they are kicking her out of her apartment, the one she paid half for. I remember this because he actually followed me on Instagram 2 days ago. Should I be petty? Self-Care Sister out. I told my best friend that her fiance was cheating on her and she did not believe me. Disclaimer, this is my story. I was 20 years old, I moved to LA. I was trying to make friends as quickly as possible. Good friends, not backstabbers. At my new job, I met this girl and she was kind of similar to me, but she was the type of person that trusted everybody. Right away, she started trusting me. She was just really kind. Started hanging out outside of work. And it was really nice because she liked to cook and so did I. She would come over to my place and we would make some food and just watch movies. After a couple of weeks, I met her fiance and I hated him right away. All he did was stare at me. What do you do when you meet your bestie's fiance and all he does is stare at you? It's disgusting. At first I thought he was kind of joking, but then I realized he was being super serious. He was trying to make cute eyes at me. So after that, I would never look him straight in the eye. I knew that's what he wanted, so I just wouldn't do it. That's when I started being really vigilant. I started noticing every single little red flag about him. One day, my bestie invites me over to a barbecue at her place, and after a couple of hours, I wanted to leave. Everyone at this point had had so many drinks. I was the only person that was sober. I go into her bedroom, and I find her with her sister. Part 2 is up. By far one of my most asked questions, how did I become an actress? If you're interested in becoming an actor, you need to listen to this. At the time I was 8 years old, I knew I wanted to become an actress. Luckily, I have a very supportive family. I told my mom and she helped me. At the time I was living in Nicaragua. Took me to a local agency and I got my first commercial when I was 8. It was for a local salon and the commercial played on local channels. From that, I was able to do modeling here and there. No, this did not help me out in school. Instead, I got bullied because of this. People were just jealous and envious. When I was 14, I got cast in my first hair show. This was for the brand Wella. The show was basically one huge catwalk. I was basically the lead. From that show, my face ended up on magazine covers and newspaper covers. As a 14-year-old, it was a lot. My hair was colored orange, red, and black. I loved it. But again, this only isolated me from the people that envied me. But I did not let that stop me. When I was 17, we moved to the US. When I got there, I signed up to every single acting website I could find. This meant that I could submit myself to local projects, including soap operas, commercials, film, and TV. The next step was getting myself an agent. And that's what I did. I wasn't the type of teenager that went out on the weekends. I was constantly looking for the next job, memorizing scripts, filming myself and practicing, and driving around to auditions with my brothers and sisters. And why do I really want to share the story? I want you guys to know that even as a 16-year-old going to auditions, I was never by myself. One of my older sisters was always with me. Didn't accept invitations from casting directors or producers. The fear of being in danger didn't let me put myself in positions that I might regret. So if you want to become an actor or a model, you have to be diligent about what you say yes to. Never, ever, ever trust people. I know this sounds severe, but trust me, you don't want to find yourself in a position where you have to say no or defend yourself. Self-preservation was always a part of me. At 19, I decided to move to LA with my fiance. I sacrificed a lot to be in LA. I worked several jobs. 2 weeks after I got to LA, I got my first agent. And I got my agent by literally calling agencies and emailing them. And this allowed me to start booking commercials. I also decided to work as an extra. After 2 years of struggling in LA, I made the best decision ever. Decided to get myself an education. I auditioned for the Stella Adler studio in New York City. And when I got accepted, it actually changed my life. I moved to New York City by myself and became a sponge. You see, I calculated it. Every class was $50. So every time I didn't pay attention, that was $50 down the drain. My mom helped me pay for my tuition. I also got a job to help pay for it. When I finally graduated, I got cast in a movie right away. The movie's called The Comedian with Robert De Niro. Since then, I have done movies and TV. The latest one, City on a Hill. And if there's any advice I could give you, it would be to listen to your instinct and have a good community of people that support you and actually be ready to sacrifice everything. Self-Care Sister out. Story time about how my husband stole my dog because I told his family that he's gay. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My husband and I had been married for 6 months before I realized he was gay. The way I found out is horrendous. Husband, almost ex, he has a gardening business. This means he works with a lot of guys. The guys that he started hiring were all very young, very attractive. Obviously, I didn't care because I never thought that he would be gay. Well, I come home one day early from work, only to find him and 3 other guys on the couch, doing different things to each other. I was horrified. I was seriously triggered and traumatized. You see, I had been essayed by 2 boys when I was in college, so walking into this literally made me vomit. Even got flashbacks. What did my husband do? The man kicked me out of the house, closed the door on me. So I proceed to start ringing the doorbell. So I decide to call 911 and say that there's 2 intruders in my house, which I mean there are. By the time the police come, they're all dressed up. Of course, it was my word against theirs. The police told me that all I could do was get a divorce. At the time, I had a 2-month-old puppy. My husband didn't really like the puppy. He was a lot of work, but it was my responsibility. After I caught him, I ran straight to his mom's house and spilled the beans. His mom and dad were furious. They called him, but he wouldn't answer his phone. Called my sister and she told me that I should just go live with her. I go home to grab my things and my puppy, but my puppy is nowhere to be found. That's when my husband told me that he probably ran away. This man refused to help me look for him. I'm filing a divorce, but it's been a month since I saw my puppy, and I know the puppy's somewhere in the house. My husband doesn't let me back into the house though, and the cops were absolutely no use. I'm planning on breaking in. I mean, what should I do? Give me advice. He started doing the dirty, but I didn't realize that my mom was home. My mom was supposed to be at work, but apparently she came home early because she felt sick. So while me and my neighbor are upstairs full on doing the dirty, my mom is downstairs making lunch. That's when the door blasts open and it's my mom holding my lunch. I have no clothes on my bed. There was no way my mom was gonna buy that. We were just hanging out. My mom throws the plate of food at my neighbor. He tries to calm my mom down and tells her that he's in love with me. By the way, I was not in love with him. I mean, I liked him, but I wasn't in love. I didn't know what to do, so I just started to cry. Suddenly, my mom calmed down. I have no idea what got into her, but she politely asked him to put on his clothes and leave. As he was getting dressed, my mom told him not to tell his mom anything, that we would keep this a secret. Once he leaves, my mom confesses to me that his mom and her are in a relationship. First off, I didn't even know that my mom swung that way. Then she asked me if I loved him. I had to lie and tell her that I did, so that she wouldn't find out the truth, that I only did it with him so that he could break up with his girlfriend to be with me. My mom gave us her blessing so that he and I could go out. Like I said, this was 10 years ago. Of course, he and I are no longer together, but my mom is still with his mom, so I see him all the time. He still begs me to be with him. I just broke up with my boyfriend, so I think I might give him a chance now. I mean, I did lose my V card to him, but he cheated on his girlfriend to be with me, and he's clingy. Do you guys think I should give him a chance? Story time about my mom caught me doing it with my neighbor. Once he started kissing me, we could not stop. I knew he had a girlfriend and I wanted to steal him away from her. So I thought, why not just do it with him so that he would leave her and be with me? That's when I took off his shirt, he took mine off, and things went from there. Let me just remind you that our moms are downstairs sleeping on the couch. Our hearts were racing and we were trying to do it as quickly as possible. By the way, I'm still a virgin at this point, and I just decided right then and there that I would just do it with him. I was being reckless as hell. That's when I hear footsteps coming up the stairs. We jump off each other and we just pretend we're talking. It was his mom coming to tell him that they were going home. My plan worked though. He started messaging me nonstop, and he even blew off his girlfriend that same week to be with me. Told him we could do it the following day if our moms weren't home. His mom went out to run some errands, so I asked my mom to go run me an errand. Evil much? I told him to come over and it happened. And no, it was not good. It was actually terrible. Neither of us knew what we were doing and it hurt like hell. But after that, he was obsessed. Anytime my mom left my house, he would try to come over. One of the times he came over, he asked me if he should break up with his girlfriend. And I said, yeah, you probably should. Duh. He literally called her right then and there and told her that he didn't want to be with her anymore. Then he turns to me and asks me if I want to be his girlfriend. Just to make him more obsessed, I said no. I told him I wasn't ready for a relationship. Then he started begging. He couldn't believe I said no. But this is when we both mess up. We start doing it. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I became a yacht girl. Here's the definition if you do not know what a yacht girl is. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Repeat, this is not my story time. I blew up on Instagram back in 2016. The amount of men that I had in my DMs was disgusting. Rich men, poor men, whatever kind of man you can think of, they were in my DMs. I quickly realized the effect that I had on men, especially the rich ones. Little backstory. Back then I had a friend who was an ESCORT. If you don't know what that means, please Google it. This girl would tell me all the time to join the agency that she was with. I just couldn't bring myself to doing that. She did make good money, but it wasn't good enough. Now, she did tell me that she never slept with the guys. I knew better. I'm what you would call an Insta model. I know, so 2016. That's the simple truth. Started getting a lot of modeling work through my Instagram, and I started working with some brands. But this was not enough money for me to pay my rent and help my parents out. At the time, I didn't have anybody managing my social media, whereas now there's a million agencies. Back then, I was just figuring it all out on my own. Fast forward to 2017. Remember that friend I mentioned who was an ESCORT? Told me about this thing called yachting. It's when girls go on a yacht, sometimes one or many rich men. They are paid to stay on that yacht to entertain and be companions to these men. She was gonna do it for the first time, so she told me that she would let me know how it went. A month later, she comes back home. You guys want to guess how much she was paid? She got paid $80,000 to spend a week on a boat, traveling the Greek islands, eating really good food, and she even got a diamond bracelet out of it. When I asked her what she had to do, she just raised her eyebrows. She didn't say anything, but she told me that she had a great time and that luckily the guy who hired her was pretty young and very attractive, and also very famous. The type of fame that if anybody found out what he was doing, he would immediately be canceled. I decided to do it myself. She gave me the number to this one woman who basically connected all these rich people to yacht girls. I messaged her and then I had to send her all of this information. I even had to go get blood work done. This was legit. She sent me back some paperwork and that was it. Not 2 days later, she called me for a job. She said, grab your passport and your purse. That's all you're gonna need. Obviously, I had to take my skincare with me, so I took a little carry-on. She told me it was gonna be me and 4 other girls, that we would spend 4 days with the billionaire on his yacht. I got paid $5,000 up front, and as soon as I got on the boat, I recognized 2 of the girls. Very famous Instagram girls. Very famous. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I got my boyfriend fired from his job because he had a girl coworker. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Instead, I mean Instagram. Well, I show up to his Abercrombie and Fitch job and I find him talking to a girl. Very pretty girl. I went insane. Pulled him aside and told him that he needed to quit right then and there. That if the tables were turned and I was the one talking to a really cute boy at my job, he would lose it and break up with me immediately. He started telling me that I was overreacting. I was being insecure. Me being insecure? Not him checking my phone every day. By the way, the girl was so nice to me. Came up to me later and said, you don't need to worry about anything. I have a boyfriend and I'm not interested in yours. I did appreciate it, but the way my boyfriend was talking to her was a no-no. So here's what I did. Waited for his shift to end, and I went straight into that Abercrombie and asked to speak to the manager. And that's when I made up the whole story. I told him that this boy that was working there was harassing me, and that he kept staring at me and grabbed my arm, which made me feel super uncomfortable and scared. And the cherry on top, I started to cry. And I told him that this wasn't the first time it happened, that the same boy had done it another time. The manager, of course, apologized right away. I left the store. 2 hours later, my boyfriend calls me crying. He said that he got fired and he didn't know why. That all the manager said was that his behavior was inappropriate. And my boyfriend couldn't figure it out. Well, he's never gonna find out that it was me that got him fired. So I begged my dad to hire my boyfriend at his car shop. And my dad did, out of the kindness of his heart. So I made my boyfriend eat all of his dirty words. Not only that, but him working at my dad's car shop allows me to keep an eye on him at all times. You see, I have access to all the cameras. And I also show up whenever I want. But here's the crazier part. Remember the girl that my boyfriend was talking to? She slid into my DMs and told me that I'm pretty. She even asked me to go on a date. I mean, should I? You know that toxic bestie that we've all had? Story time. Disclaimer, this is my story. After she embarrassed me on purpose by introducing me as her little friend who works at a Mexican restaurant, I wanted to crawl in a hole and die. I was standing in front of a bunch of celebrities while this F-list celeb made me feel so small. But she was also the kind of girl that would recover really quickly. She would start complimenting me on how beautiful I was. So I would feel better about her having just embarrassed me. I would somehow just justify it in my mind. She was also the type of girl that would start telling me all of her secrets. And this is when I made a big mistake. I started trusting her with my own secrets. This is what those toxic besties want. They want you to trust them so quickly and for you to fall right into their trap. Well, I did. I talked to her about my relationship with the fiance that I had at the time, and I even confided in her about the essay that I had experienced. And before I knew it, she started copying my style. My first language is Spanish, and sometimes I answer in Spanish. If you ask me, do you want a bottle of water? Sometimes I'll say sí or no. So she started saying sí or no. And I laughed when this happened. I quickly realized that I was influencing her more than she was influencing me. On one occasion, she invited me out with her friends. Suddenly, I became the topic of conversation. All of her girlfriends started asking me about my SA and what that was like. And they started bringing up all the issues I had with my fiance. I realized that everything I had told her, she repeated back to them. I felt like an animal in a zoo. They stared at me, asked me questions, and waited for me to answer. They lived for the drama. My drama, to be exact. After that, I realized she wasn't a friend. She was a frenemy, a gossiping, drama-addicted frenemy, waiting for me to fail so that she can feed off of me. You know you have or have had that bestie. And if you still do, I think you know what you need to do. Self-care sister out. Do you have a bestie that's a little bit toxic? Story time. Disclaimer, this is my story. When I was 20, I moved to LA. I was so broke, I had 4 jobs at the same time. I worked at a hookah lounge where I cleaned the toilets and served. I also worked at a Mexican restaurant, I walked dogs, and I was a personal assistant. The Mexican restaurant I worked at was on Sunset Boulevard. And boy oh boy did I meet a lot of celebrities. On one occasion, I met a girl who was in a couple of movies. Is she in movies now? No, she's not. So I would say she's like an F-list celebrity. She was the type of girl that got everyone's attention, wanted to be the life of the party. And as soon as I walked up to her table, this girl wanted to adopt me me. She kept saying things like, oh my gosh, you're so cute. Right away, she was acting like my best friend. It was as if the it girl, the popular girl at high school, wanted to befriend me. I fell for it hard and fast. She had a lot of money, and because I was so broke, she would pick me up and take me places with her. She took me to a couple of industry parties. This is where her envy was showing. She introduced me to a couple of people. And by a couple of people, I mean huge celebrities. But you know how she introduced me? You guys, meet my little friend. Her name's Esther, and she's a struggling actress. She works at a Mexican restaurant. I wanted to crawl in a hole and never come out. Part 2 is up. I almost married the wrong man. Story time. Disclaimer, this is my story time. When I asked him to get a higher paying job so he could help me out with the bills, he flat out said no. His job at the theater was too cozy. And a few weeks later, I experienced something horrible at the dance club that I was working at, which made me reflect on every choice I had made up until that point. I left my family to move away with somebody I didn't know, to a new city, thousands of miles away. I left my mom with major depression. To this day, I still hold so much guilt for that. And I told my fiance about the essay that I experienced at the club. His response was for me to get over it. When I told him I wanted to quit, he said no. How dare I try to quit the job that was providing for him? I broke up with him 2 days later, only to fall into an even more toxic relationship. But that's for another time. Self-care sister out. Story time about how my best friend outed me on purpose. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. That's when my best friend in the middle of the party yells out, she's gay and you don't even know it. My dad grabbed me by the arm and pulled me into the kitchen. That's when he said, what is that about? And I just started crying. This was literally something I was never, ever, ever going to tell my parents. I did not want them to know that I was gay. My mom starts crying too. And that's when my dad starts crying too. That's when my mom says, I've known it all this time. Then they started asking me why I was doing this to them, why I was being such a bad daughter. That's when my best friend and her parents come into the kitchen. And they told my parents that everybody should just go home. They told all the guests to leave, and then my best friend took me to her house. Guess what? My parents didn't want to speak to me after that. They reproached me every single day. They even wanted to send me to a camp to get rehabilitated. Of course I said no. Oh yeah, and remember the boy they promised me to? My parents invited him and his parents over for dinner, and this guy tried to kiss me again. He got me alone in the laundry room and literally went to town. I pushed him away and threatened him. This guy's literally crazy. As soon as I turned 18, I moved out. My parents don't really speak to me. And I broke up with my bestie. She's always begging me to forgive her. Should I? Story time about how I asked my girlfriend to marry me 3 times and she said no. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm a 27-year-old male. My girlfriend is 33. We started dating 2 years ago. A couple of months in, we started talking about marriage and she sounded really open to it. My dream has always been to get married and have kids. I never thought I would fall in love this hard. I have dated girls before, but I have never put in this much effort. To tell you that I took her to meet my parents 2 weeks after I met her, and even after 2 years, I keep falling in love with her. I'm really close to my parents and I decided to tell them that I wanted to marry her. They told me to go for it. So I planned a very elaborate proposal. I even got her 2 best friends to help me. I hired a photographer, a videographer, and I got the type of ring that I knew she would love from Tiffany's. The day of the proposal, everything went perfect. She showed up looking absolutely beautiful, her friends were hiding behind a bush, and the photographer and the videographer got everything just at the right time. But guess what the problem was? She said no. She told me that she definitely didn't think we were ready for marriage or even to be engaged. This is a fundamental flaw. I don't agree with her. So 2 weeks later, I proposed again. And guess what she said? Part 2 is up.